Good morning and good coffee to you. So first and foremost, I just want to say this is me pre-coffee and during coffee. So if you're expecting, I don't know, any continuity of thought or of conversation, I make no guarantees. Also, I wanted to just tell you right from the offset, most of you who have seen my videos before know that I'm not an advocate of isolationism, okay? If your idea of living off-grid is, completely disconnecting from society, it's not really going to be what we're talking about today. And if you are into that, great. It's been my experience that people who want to disconnect from society probably ought to disconnect from society. So more power to you. Do what you're going to do. So what I do want to talk about today, and again, these pauses are going to be constant until I'm done with at least this first bit of coffee. What I want to talk about today are just some things that you may not have really taken into consideration before you decided to take on this project of moving off-grid. And the first one is, how do you make ends meet? How do you go out there and make money? Because, if you're going to live in society, you're going to need some money. Marcus, you should get coffee. You're going to need some money. Your property's going to have taxes. You're going to need fuel. You're going to need money to buy materials if you can't get them from a scrap location. I've been really fortunate to find almost every material that I've used on almost every project for free or almost free, and that has saved us a tremendous amount of money. But if you watched my last live video on the group, you'll remember me talking about practicing a marketable skill. You may find this hard to believe, but prior to me coming out here, I was a marketing expert. Like that's what I did. I was a brander. I built brands at a water company out in Las Vegas. I was a VP of sales and marketing. For there, I worked for a nonprofit for 5 years and was one of the top producers in that network in the entire world. You may find it hard to believe, but being a marketing expert doesn't really help you in off-grid living. You could draw parallels if you're really creative, but no, that didn't help. Now, I did have some experience as an electrician, and when we first came out here, we needed money, and I put an ad up on Craigslist to go out and get any electrical work I could or maintenance work. There's going to be gas stations and little places where people congregate in smaller groups, and they have poster boards usually where you can put something up saying, I'm a this and I'm looking for work doing this. The problem is if you come out to a place like this and you don't have a marketable skill. I found that there was hundreds of people who knew electrical. There was maybe 2 people who were certified electricians or electrical contractors in the county. But everybody knew how to wire up this or that, or could do most of their troubleshooting and maintenance sort of stuff. So it wasn't really a skill that was very helpful. And then I started working, I was, looking around, talking to people, networking through what I call the good old boy network, all the ranchers and the people who own businesses in the area. And ended up getting a gig working on building a handling facility at a big buffalo ranch. And that was super cool. That was the first time I'd ever worked with animals, and the first animal we worked with was buffalo. And that was like, let me just tell you, there's I don't think a thing on the planet that can truly frighten me anymore. I was knocked off of what was it? Gosh, a 5,000 or 6,000 pound tractor by a buffalo who didn't like that I was going to stop chipping off hay to him. And, you know, buffalo do this thing with their head, you know, and they start doing this figure eight thing, you know that they're going to try and kill you. So you get the hell out of the handling facility. But anyway, that was my first experience with animals. And I started learning, you know, how to do all the things that you needed to do there. Then it got to the point in the job where they needed a welder. And my dad was a master underwater welder. He was, you know, there's a lot of ways to describe him. He wasn't necessarily a great guy. He was a biker and everything. He died when I was 10. And I was associated welding and metalworking with him, so I never got into it until that job happened. I was like, I need to learn how to weld. So I hit up all of my good old boy network contacts that had welders and had people, you know, start showing me the things that they knew. And then I went ahead and went to the local college, which was about a half hour away, and did the whole welding and fabrication program. You know, not to do that job, but to get myself certified as a welder. So I went through and did the whole program, got my 6G certification, and found out that I had an aptitude for it, and really excelled at the skill, and was able to barter that skill with people, to trade for materials, trade for things. You know, I've done welding jobs in exchange for wood stoves, you know, not just money, big piles of 2x4s, all kinds of different stuff. So when I say practice a marketable skill, it has to be a skill that is useful in the area that you're going to move to. And the only way you can find that out is by communicating with the people who are in that area, who are already, who know what that particular area needs. What are the needs of that community that you're moving into? Good morning, Heidi. So what I found out was this area needed a good welder who wasn't the only welder who was going to charge, you know, $150, $200 an hour to get, you know, certifiable welding jobs done. So I kind of got myself into that niche, and then, you know, started making, you know, other things, blades, axes, hammers. You know, my brother has a website, and he makes jeweler's tools. And we came up with an idea for a hammer together that works really well. So, you know, you just have to think creatively, and you have to think outside of what you're used to thinking with as far as making money. You know, you're probably not going to go out and find... I did. You're probably not going to go out and find a 9-to-5 job. Now, on the other hand, my wife had a very marketable skill. She was a musician. And most musicians want to go to a place and find a place to play music. Well, we were looking around on Craigslist for, you know, little odd jobs or gigs, and she came across a post saying that one of the local rural schools, which had, at the time it was like 16 students, wanted to have a music program. So now once a week she drives, it's like an hour and 20 minutes to get to this school. She drives out there, she gives every kid a private lesson, and then does a group lesson with the older kids and the younger kids. And that job led to another school hearing about her program and wanting one similar to it. She picked up that school as well. And then a bunch of private lessons. So we can make ends meet. There's not a lot of money in the place that we live. It's a fairly, you know, economically depressed area. But there are things that are important to people that people will pay for, and if you've positioned yourself to be able to fill a need, you'll have no problem. It's you know, it's not as hard as people make it out to be. You just got to be creative, and you got to be persistent. It goes back to what I said in my first video about what kind of person is successful out here. It's that stubborn person who doesn't take no for an answer, and doesn't take obstacles for a stop, but as an opportunity to, you know, take the scenic route and see what else is out there. Get around the hill, you know. You don't have to necessarily look at it and go, I can't get over it. So, anyhow, so that's a viewpoint that you can take to make ends meet out here. Get online, Google, you know, skills, off-grid living skills, or rural community needs. You know, these sorts of things will give you ideas of what kind of a service that you can provide. The other thing is that will position you in the community as somebody who is important in the community, not because you can swing a checkbook around, but because you have a needed skill that people will seek you out for. And that is a very important point in and of itself, is there is a social aspect to, especially if you're moving out of a city and you're moving to a rural area, the culture shock is, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. For example, one thing I'll see people with license plates from other places, you know, and there's a bigger city up in Oregon, and you can pretty much just know that if you see an Oregon plate in my area, they probably either came from Medford or I was the epitome of city boy. Like, oh, this is something I want to hit on right now. All of the things that I say, I don't say because I claim to be an expert or I think that I know more than anybody else or anything else like that. I do have a skill that I think I do better than anybody else in the world, and that's make mistakes. I'm the best mistake maker that you will ever come across in your entire life. And the mistakes I make are so solidly huge and real that they burn themselves into my memory, so I can learn from them, you know, pretty well. Let's see, what is that? Why is the steering wheel? Oh. So everything that I talk about, I talk about from a position of I made a huge mistake in doing this or that, and I want to just give you the information. If you're the kind of person that has to learn from your own mistakes, then, you know, I encourage you to do so. It's a really good way to go about learning. But if you can learn from my mistakes or from other people's mistakes and still get something out of that, then I recommend you do so. It'll save you a tremendous amount of headache and heartache and heartburn and ulcers and whatnot. So anyhow, so that takes me back to the second point I wanted to talk about, which was navigating the social desert. You know, when you're in the city and you're walking around or you're driving around, the pace that your life is moving at is so much faster than what it will be out in a rural community. You don't have time to think about things like being social or waving to people when they drive by or making eye contact with people when you walk by them in the store. These are things that we were taught as kids, like that's what manners are. And I think when life gets going really fast, it becomes difficult to think about that kind of stuff. You know, your head's down and you're trying to accomplish your goal because you got 55 things to do before you can go home or before you can get to work or before you can go do laundry or anything else. You know, it's the pace at which life moves in a urban area is 5-6 times that of a rural area. And one of the biggest things that I was not weirded out about, I really loved it. It was one of the ways that I knew that I was in a place that worked for me, was when I went to the store, people would have 10-minute conversations with you. And it threw me off so far that I had to sit down and really give it some thought, because it was completely unrealistic to me. And what I realized is that you're not the only one in that community who lives remotely, who lives way out in the forest or in the woods, or on 5,000 acres 40 minutes away from town, and people will come to town to do their stuff once a month, once every couple of weeks, maybe even once a week. And when they do that, one of the things they'd really love to do is have a little social interaction. I don't know if you've ever spent 2 or 3 weeks without talking to anybody but your wife, and it doesn't matter how much you love your wife, you want to talk to somebody else at that point. You want to have conversation that's not what you expect. You want to say hi to somebody you've never met, or at least I do. I'm a social guy. I actually do like to interact with people. I just like to be able to go to my property, which is, a long distance away from any other people, and choose how often I have that interaction. So what I've experienced is new people will come into this area, and you'll try to have a conversation with them at the store, and they're like, what is he trying? He's going to try and con me out of something. Or, they're expecting you to try and you're trying to do something, or accomplish some goal, get something out of them. When really all you're trying to do is say hi. And, yeah, absolutely. The pace is completely and totally different, And then there's also things out here, like I can go into the city and work circles around any manual laborer that I've ever experienced working with in the past, because then you'll find other things that the pace is much faster. Like work, you get stuff done out here. You don't have 2 supervisors watching you dig a hole that you get halfway through before you pass it off to your partner so you can take a mandated break. That's like, that ain't happening out here. You're going to work 15, 16-hour days for 3 weeks at a time, and then you're not going to be able to find work for, 2 months. That's more the pace, how it works out here. So, anyhow, what I see those people doing as the mistakes that they're making are they're painting a big target on themselves. Those people that don't want to interact, that don't want to converse, because in a small area, you've also never experienced what a rumor mill is really like. You think that rumors spread fast or opinions about you spread fast in a large urban area. You have no idea, because maybe if a ton of people in the city find out that you did something ridiculous, that ton of people represents 0.00001% of the population. You do something, you get a name for being an antisocial person, or somebody who's just kind of a jerk, or that you don't want to do business with. Out here, 80% of the people know the next day. And you'll be amazed at how, you being mean to one person, and suddenly for the next 2 weeks, no one will talk to you. This doesn't seem like a big deal to an isolationist, or to somebody who doesn't really want to, I don't know. I think something just happened. Oh, there you are. Anyhow, if you don't want to be that person who has that target in a rural area painted on your back, believe it or not, humans are social animals. We're people who definitely want to do, we want to interact with people. We want to have relationships with people, and we want to have help with projects, and we want to help others with projects, and exchange with each other. That's kind of the basic nature of humans. And if you set yourself up to fail by setting yourself up to be the person who is against those people in your new rural environment, you're going to fail, and they'll ensure it. One thing about moving into a place like this, they don't like change. And I'm not really, here to talk about whether a person should or shouldn't go out and try and change things that they don't agree with in their society. Just know that if you move from a large urban center into a rural area and you pack your protest signs with you, you're going to be met with resistance, like maybe even more than resistance. These places have maintained a culture that they want to continue to maintain. So, and chances are, if you're moving out of that big urban area, you're not going to want to bring the things with you from the city that you hated about being in the city. I see it all the time. Like I'll go to the gas station and there'll be people who definitely did not come from here. And if they've been here for a while, they haven't been here for very long. And they're just, being mean to the lady behind or at the gas station, or, being rude to the people at the gas pump. That's like the social, that's the community's, coffee pot, the water jug. That's where they get around to talk. And let me just tell you, a poor attitude in an area like this will get around, and people just won't want to work with you. They won't want to help you. And it will get very difficult. So anyway, I'm, essentially beating a horse that was dead a while ago, because really the point is to just make yourself have those manners that you learned in kindergarten be in when you're dealing with people out here, and you'll find that life will be very easy. You'll see my posts all the time. People bring me stuff that they think that I need, and sometimes I'll tell them, you know what, I don't have, space to have that or whatever, because I communicate with people in a good manner. I try to be nice to people. I try to be helpful. Out here, you pull over and help somebody if they're broken down on the side of the road. In the city, that's like, holy crap, jump in your car and lock the door. You have no idea what's going to happen. Gosh, my wife has broken down 2 or 3 times. And if it hadn't have been for people stopping and helping her, spending like an hour and a half, 2 hours helping her, she would have been stranded out like literally halfway between that school I was talking about earlier and here, 30 minutes from anything driving. But if you're that person who everybody knows is, that guy's a jerk, nobody's going to stop and help you. And you'll see, this is one of those things that you can make the mistake if you want, but it takes a while for you to get, back into it. Let's see, you wave from your car to everyone and they wave back. Yeah, that's the thing, and it'll make you, You'll be like, what the hell is going on? Are my lights on? Are my high beams on? People are flagging me down, It was the weirdest thing. I absolutely loved it. I was like, yay! Because when I was at the gas station in the city, I'd want to talk to people. I'd want to have a conversation with them. It's one of the main reasons I knew that I was not meant to live there, and the first time I was driving around on these these back highways and people were every car was waving at me, I was, gosh, I'm home. So yeah. So anyway, I wanted to just take, that time and talk about those things and give you an idea of other things to think about before you move yourself out and yourself and your family out to the middle of nowhere. These are things you need to think about. And just remember that, again, if I have a strong opinion about something, it's not because I'm an expert or because I'm smarter than anybody else. It's just because I've made a really big mistake in that area. I'm sure of it. It's the only time I ever get strong opinions about anything. And I just communicate from the position of having known that. I wanted to see if you guys had any questions, and it doesn't have to be about what we talked about. We'll try and keep it on subject for off-grid living, but if you have any questions at all, I'd be happy to take a few minutes and answer them. Let's see what you got. Maybe some people have already written. A new person, the first thing they talk about is their neighbor. I learned to listen and not to talk. Rob, that's a really good point. I had mentioned earlier that I used to be a marketing expert, and one of the things in sales that people do is they talk themselves out of sales, right? They'll just keep talking and keep selling, and the person loses interest because they're interested in the thing, not what you have to say. And I wrote a hat write-up one time about the 80-20 rule in a conversation that you're trying to, that in any conversation, if you can spend 80% of the time talking and only 20% of the time, 80% of the time listening and 20% of the time talking, you'll tend to be able to get a lot further in conversations with people. So that's a really good point, Rob. No, you know what it is, Rob? I've got the selfie cam so I can see myself, and I don't have something stuck in my teeth or in my beard or something. And for some reason, it broadcasts backwards. I don't think it processes on the live feed to flip it back around again. Let's see. What was worst adaptation? For me, as far as the social adaptation goes, Brian? I don't know if you're in a position to be able to write that back. Well, what I think you're asking is adapting to the social aspect of things. I have a funny story about that. I knew this, or when we first came out here, one of the people who had offered to help us with some stuff was this real country guy. Real nice, but real country. And I went over there with another friend that I made, and we were all talking. He was telling a story about how when he was in high school, he got kicked out of high school and got all upset about, having been thrown out of high school. So he went up to the dam, that's the reservoir for the whole city, and he just took a leak in the reservoir. And, my first response was to laugh at him and say, "Oh, you got over on all of them today, didn't you?" And the look on his face was like, "You're going to sit in my front room and make fun of me, boy?" And my buddy David took me outside and he's like, "Listen, you're a funny guy. You've got quite a bit of wit to you. But it's not going to be appreciated in that kind of situation. And remember, all of these people have guns." So that was my hardest adaptation, was to close my mouth. My mouth gets me into a lot of trouble. I like to point out the funny things, and some people don't appreciate it. So let's see. All right, Brandy. How do you get kids who are accustomed to living off the grid, or living on the grid, accustomed to living off the grid? Well, that's an interesting question. First and foremost, do you have a dog, Brandy, by chance? Do you have or pets? And this is kind of just an analogy, so even if you don't, you have a pet and you live in an apartment, that pet stays inside and lives the indoor dog life. And then you take them to the dog park, and at first they want to just be right by your heel. They want to be, right there on you. And then you let them off the leash and they sniff around a little bit, and they start running around. They find some other dogs to play with. They find a tree to drag around. You know what I mean? Once you let the dog off the leash and they find out that, wow, I can run around and I can play and I can get all of my energy out and all of these things, the dog just kind of comes alive. Now, I'm not trying to make the analogy that, you know, kids are like dogs. What I'm trying to say is that what I found out here is that this is a kid's natural habitat. You know, they want to climb trees. They want to climb rocks. They want to, you know, run around in the sand, and they want to fall and skin their knee. They want to do all of this stuff. And really see, I have this concept about on grid. Okay. And the sun's coming out, so I'm going to make an adjustment here. The grid was developed simply to make it easier to distribute power to the masses. If you look at the population density prior to the grid really being developed, people were all spread out all over the place. The grid goes in, and then it was marketed to you that you need to all just get into the grid area. You know, like you need to get where the grid is. And essentially, you were herded, you know, just like cattle. That's why you herd cattle. It makes it easier to keep an eye on all of them, protect them, to give them medicine, and to feed them. That's what the grid did for society. It herded people. And, you know, you take a herded animal and then you put them out on open land, they come to life. You know, wild horses do the same thing. It's amazing to watch. You know, kids are the same way. You get them out here and they're going to go through their technology withdrawals and everything else. And I'm not saying don't have technology. We have internet connection. We have everything that you could possibly want. As far as technology goes. So, I mean, it's really, life isn't that much different out here. You just got a lot more room to live it, you know? So, I hope that answers your question. And really, you just put them there, and they're going to come to life. They're going to come to life. Let's see. My girls will roost you all. Yeah, right? I'm going to take a video later. I built an obstacle course out here for my kids. And at first they were real like, da-da-da. It took them like 2 minutes. Now these kids, even my 2-year-old, will grab onto the zip line rope, pull herself up onto the chair, and down the zip line, jump off, and then climb some rope bridges that I built. I mean, your kids will come to life out here, you know, taking them and disconnecting them from the stuff, the emo haircuts and the attitudes that you have in the city, you know, will do wonders, you know. It really will. All right, let's see what else we got here. Yep. All trees are, I don't know, that's going to open up a lot of opinions. How do you make money off your property? And you may not have seen the first part of the video. I was talking specifically about making money. As far as all trees, well, I mean, you got trees that are good for firewood, and you got trees that are good for building, and you got trees that are good for ornamentation. And so in that way, they all have value. Honestly, a lot of people cut firewood, you know, so you're going to try and be breaking into a saturated market there. But earlier I was talking about, I went from being a marketing guy to a metal expert when I came out here. And that is what I exchange with the community out here, is welding and metalwork, ornamental metal, that kind of stuff. All right, let's see. And I think I saw something else up here. All right, rural building codes. Heidi, you know, building codes are building codes. You gotta do what you gotta do. There's a lot of things that people do to get around them. They'll make 5 or 6 little 10 by 12 sheds and build a fence around them, and now you got a compound. And you know, sooner or later, somebody's gonna, you know, they're gonna fly over with a camera and take a picture and see you built something, and they're gonna show up and do an assessment and everything. The only thing I can tell you there is build a fence. put no trespass, 3 no trespassing signs up, and make it really obvious that you don't want any visitors from the county. Water collection, and if you are allowed solar. I live right on the very tip of California, and the brilliance of our already failed governor from, what was it, the early 90s, late 80s, when he failed at his job the first time then, made it illegal to collect water. So collecting water is something that, we can only talk about hypothetically. But there's a really easy math equation you can Google on how to figure out how much water you can collect from your roof. And it's thousands of gallons every year, even if you only get a foot of rain every year. So I think water collection is a really great way to go. And the people who have it the most worked out, I think, are the Michael Richards crew, the Earthship people. When they don't dig wells, they only do water collection, and they reuse the water 4 times before it ends up watering their fruit trees outside. So go water collection. It is the cheapest and most effective way to immediately have water in an area you don't have a well in. Not money to live on fresh food. Oh, you mean like selling, food and that kind of stuff? I don't know. I'm not so much into the selling of if I grow vegetables, we don't have a ton of water, so if I grow vegetables or fruit or anything else, I'm gonna feed them to my kids, and that's why I'm saying practice a marketable skill. Have be a carpenter, be a welder, be some trade that you can exchange with people. Yeah. Is there any other questions about maybe any of the stuff that we talked about? The social navigation sort of a thing? I think that might be it. That might be all the questions that we got. Hi, Tech. Tech, you got any questions before I sign off? I'm right about to sign off right now. Look at this. I didn't even get through my sliced peaches jar of coffee. How did you learn your basic off-grid basics? I'm the kind of person who has to beat down walls with their forehead. So when I came out here, I knew nothing. I could hardly start a fire. Yeah. I had done a lot of camping and stuff when I was a kid, and then I really had no skills when I came out here. Let me tell you how little a skill I had. I brought a 4,000 watt generator and an electric chainsaw. Yeah. And a 50-foot cable. In the animal kingdom is your ability to overcome your environment, to adapt to it and overcome your environment. That, and you have thumbs. So really, any of the problem that you want to solve, like, let's say you need the skill of gardening. Well, chances are you're going to have a cell phone when you come out here. You're going to have access to YouTube. You're going to have access to all of the information at your fingertips that the world has to offer. So I just say when you come out here, immerse yourself in it. Learn about what you need to learn, and as you need to learn it, and that'll make it solid in your mind too, because you're actually doing it there in front of you. Is your wife supportive? This was my wife's idea. Yeah, she's very supportive. Actually, she's the most supportive person I've ever met in my entire life, and I'm a pretty supportive person. She's really an amazing. She's amazing. Oh, and she puts up with so much of my crap just because. Oh, thank you for watching, Brian, and everybody else too. You love my coffee cup? I love my coffee cup too. My definition of a coffee cup is anything that will not melt with boiling water in it. So anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys learned something. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'll do my best to try and get as many of them answered as I possibly can. We're going into spring, so my interaction time is a little bit less. I got tons of work to do, and I recently picked up a couple of ornamental metal commissions that I need to get started this weekend. So I will do my best, and I hope that you guys have a great weekend, and that you're super productive. Yeah, so there you go. Remember, production will put a smile on your face, so go do something. Have a good one, guys.